Picture this. You open your phone and within 3 swipes you see it. Someone is stepping into a tub of ice water, gritting their teeth, staring intensely into the camera, and telling you that this agonizing 3-minute ritual is the ultimate secret to human optimization. They are promising that freezing yourself will skyrocket your testosterone, reverse the aging process, and most importantly, melt away stubborn body fat.
It has become the defining image of modern wellness. We have taken something incredibly uncomfortable, packaged it as a life hack, and built a multi-billion-dollar industry around it. You have people spending upwards of $12,000 on luxury cold plunge setups for their garages, all chasing this promise of metabolic superiority.
Exactly. It's no longer just a niche athletic recovery tool, it's a mainstream lifestyle aesthetic. But whenever an industry explodes that quickly and the claims become that miraculous, we have to pause. Because what if the biggest, most attractive claim of all, the idea that plunging into ice water is a shortcut to burning fat, is deeply exaggerated? What if we are looking at one of the greatest illusions in modern health culture?
That is exactly what the scientific literature suggests. When you step away from the viral clips and the biohacking theater and you actually look at the clinical research, the story changes completely. Cold plunges do have physiological effects, some of which are genuinely fascinating, but as a strategy for meaningful, sustained fat loss, the biological math simply does not add up the way social media wants you to believe.
Let's unpack that, because to understand the illusion, we have to understand how the dream was sold in the first place. The modern cold plunge movement didn't originate in hospitals or mainstream medical clinics. It grew through the internet. It was fueled by performance influencers and this relentless dopamine-driven optimization culture. It became associated with mental toughness. The narrative was essentially, if you have the discipline to freeze yourself every morning, you will unlock a warrior mindset and a leaner body.
And the marketing genius of that narrative is that it relies on a half-truth. The influencers didn't just invent the fat loss claim out of thin air, they hijacked a legitimate biological concept and stretched it to its absolute breaking point. The buzzword that fueled this entire empire is brown fat.
Right? Brown fat activation. You hear that phrase thrown around in almost every ice bath tutorial. Let's decode the actual science here. What exactly is brown fat, and how does it differ from the fat people are actually trying to lose?
To put it simply, humans have 2 main types of fat, white fat and brown fat. White adipose tissue is the fat we are all familiar with. It is basically the body's energy storage unit. If you eat more calories than you burn, your body packs it away in white fat cells for later use. Think of white fat as a biological pantry. Brown adipose tissue, on the other hand, is entirely different. It is metabolically active. It is packed with mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of the cell.
So if white fat is the pantry, brown fat is more like a furnace?
Precisely. The primary job of brown fat is thermogenesis, generating heat to keep your core temperature stable when you're exposed to the cold. When you step into a freezing tub, your body senses a threat to its survival. It activates that brown fat, which then burns energy to create heat. This is a brilliant evolutionary mechanism to prevent us from freezing to death.
And I can see exactly why the biohacking world took that scientific fact and ran with it. If brown fat burns energy and cold activates brown fat, then logically, sitting in the cold should turn your body into a calorie-burning machine, right? It sounds like the ultimate metabolic loophole.
It sounds perfect in a TikTok video, yes. But here is the critical scientific reality that gets conveniently left out of the sales pitch. The actual calorie expenditure from a typical 3 to 5 minute cold plunge is incredibly modest. We are talking about a very slight uptick in energy use. Yes, the furnace turns on, but it's burning a few matchsticks, not a whole forest.
So we are looking at a massive discrepancy between the technical truth and the real-world impact. Technically, you are burning calories to stay warm. Practically, it's not enough to change your body composition.
Exactly. Let's look at the numbers. The extra calories you burn during a short bout of cold exposure might amount to a few dozen calories. It is certainly not enough to offset a poor diet, a lack of sleep, or a sedentary lifestyle. You cannot outplunge a bad lifestyle. And there is another layer to this that makes the fat loss claim even more problematic.
The appetite response? I've noticed this myself. If I swim in a cold ocean, I don't feel lean and optimized afterward. I feel ravenously hungry.
You've hit the nail on the head. Cold exposure drops your core temperature, and your body's natural, evolutionary response to a drop in temperature is to seek out dense, high-calorie energy to refuel the furnace. Many studies indicate that cold exposure can significantly increase appetite in the hours following the event. So, you might burn an extra 50 calories shivering in the ice, but you are highly likely to subconsciously consume an extra 300 calories later in the day because your biological drive to eat has been amplified.
That completely shatters the illusion. The image of people melting belly fat inside these expensive tubs is largely a marketing fantasy. It's a classic case of taking a micromechanism, short-term metabolic activation, and falsely promising macro results.
It is metabolic theater. If your goal is strictly body fat reduction, a brisk 30-minute walk in the sunshine is going to do far more for your energy expenditure and metabolic health than a 3-minute ice bath, without triggering that massive compensatory hunger response.
But this brings us to a fascinating crossroads. If cold plunges are not the fat-melting miracles they are claimed to be, why are so many high-performing, intelligent people completely addicted to them? Because people aren't just faking it. They step out of the water and genuinely report feeling energized, euphoric, and mentally sharper. If it's not fat loss, what is actually happening to the body?
This is where the science becomes incredibly nuanced and, honestly, much more interesting than the fat loss myth. What people are experiencing is not a metabolic transformation, it is a profound nervous system stimulation. When you submerge yourself in freezing water, you are intentionally triggering a controlled trauma response.
A fight or flight state.
Exactly. Your brain perceives the extreme cold as a life-threatening event. In response, it dumps a massive cocktail of neurochemicals into your system. We see huge spikes in adrenaline and noradrenaline, which cause that immediate gasping reflex and the intense feeling of alertness. But the real star of the show is dopamine.
Dopamine, the molecule of motivation and reward.
Research shows that cold water immersion can increase dopamine levels by up to 250%, and unlike the quick, cheap dopamine hits we get from scrolling on social media or eating sugar, the dopamine released from cold exposure is sustained. It stays elevated for hours. That is why people feel like absolute superhumans when they get out of the tub. They are riding a massive, natural chemical high.
It's essentially a biological cup of coffee, but exponentially stronger. It elevates mood, clears brain fog, and gives you a surge of immediate focus.
Yes, and there is also the psychological component of hormesis. Hormesis is the concept that exposing the body to short, controlled bursts of stress actually builds adaptive resilience. By forcing yourself to endure the freezing water, you are training your mind to stay calm in the presence of extreme physical panic. You are actively down-regulating your stress response. Over time, that can translate to feeling more grounded and resilient when facing psychological stresses at work or in daily life.
So, to summarize the real science, cold exposure acts primarily as a nervous system stimulus and a mood elevator, not a fat loss strategy. It's a tool for mental resilience and neurochemical activation.
That is the most accurate way to view it. It is a fantastic tool for alertness and perceived recovery. Many athletes use it because it numbs pain and reduces the perception of muscle soreness, allowing them to feel refreshed. But we have to separate those legitimate neurological and psychological benefits from the fabricated metabolic claims.
Which leads me to wonder about the darker side of this entire culture. It feels like modern wellness has developed an obsession with extremes. There is this underlying philosophy that if something isn't agonizing, it isn't working. We market discomfort as superiority.
It is a very dangerous trap. We have conflated punishment with progress. The biohacking culture often promotes these dramatic, intense interventions because they look great on camera and they provide an immediate, tangible sensation. You feel the ice. You feel the shock, therefore you assume you are getting healthier. But true biology is much subtler than social media storytelling.
It's the difference between intensity and consistency. People are willing to spend thousands of dollars to freeze themselves for 3 minutes, but they completely ignore the unsexy foundational pillars of health.
Exactly. Real, profound health does not come from shocking your system. It depends on circadian rhythm regulation, getting 8 hours of quality sleep, managing chronic psychological stress, eating nutrient-dense whole foods, and engaging in consistent, moderate movement. You cannot biohack your way out of sleep deprivation or a terrible diet by jumping into an ice bath.
It's almost as if we are using the cold plunge as a band-aid for the exhaustion of modern life. We are so chronically stressed and fatigued that we have to electrocute our nervous systems with freezing water just to feel awake.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. And this is where the conflict between influencers and medical reality becomes so stark. Science evolves carefully. A researcher will publish a paper saying, cold water immersion shows potential for acute catecholamine release and may be beneficial for mood regulation under specific conditions.
And then an influencer reads the abstract and screams into their camera, "This changes everything. Melt fat and cure your depression in 3 minutes."
Exactly. Social media algorithms reward absolute certainty and hyperbolic claims. Nuance doesn't go viral. So the subtle, conditional findings of actual scientists get mutated into these sweeping, miraculous promises. This creates a massive distortion in what the public believes it takes to be healthy.
So where does this leave the average listener? If someone is listening to this right now, looking at their expensive cold plunge tub, or thinking about buying one, what is the ultimate takeaway? Should they avoid cold exposure altogether?
Not necessarily. If you enjoy the cold plunge, if it makes you feel mentally refreshed, if it serves as a powerful psychological anchor for your morning routine, and you are doing it safely, then by all means, continue. It is a fascinating tool for manipulating your neurochemistry and building mental toughness.
But they need to manage their expectations.
Precisely. You have to understand what the tool is actually doing. It is not magic. It is not going to melt away modern metabolic disease. It is not a substitute for the hard, boring work of daily health maintenance. If you are plunging into ice water, but you are only sleeping 5 hours a night, your biological accounting is completely backwards.
It really comes down to critical thinking. We have to stop looking for biological shortcuts. The wellness industry will always try to sell us intensity, whether it's a freezing tub, a boiling sauna, or an extreme diet. But the human body doesn't want extreme volatility, it wants balance.
Beautifully said. Critical thinking is arguably the most important health skill you can develop in the modern era. We have to learn to look past the aesthetic of health, the luxury setups, and the viral trends, and focus on the physiology. Health is not built through viral moments or agonizing hacks. It is built through long-term, quiet, biological consistency.
The real foundations of health are remarkably unsexy. Sleep, stress regulation, walking, nutrition, connection. A cold plunge might wake you up, but those foundational habits are what actually keep you alive. And that is the truth behind the illusion.